Last time we were together, we answered this big question. How have rivers, mountains, and deserts shaped the development of China's first dynasty, the Shang Dynasty? Let's do a quick review. Find your timeline on page 6 and find the Shang Dynasty. Remember, the dynasty's date and name is below in this case, and then we're going to write important facts above. So the dynasty was run by kings at first. Remember, they were fighting, and warlords, of course, were also part of that fighting as well. And then they turned into military leaders through the unification of the dynasty. So it was once separate territories that then they decided to then work together and come together through the use of those military leaders to form the first dynasty, which is the Shang Dynasty. We know that this dynasty emerged due to the two rivers, so its location was vital to the success, the Huanghe, of course, and the Yangtze River. The Yangtze, the Huanghe is also known as the Yellow River because of the soil it brought. Remember, the lace is really an important detail because the lace is what brought the nutrients and which enabled to grow more crops, which then, of course, we could increase the population. And it's important to also remember that this is China's first dynasty. And the reason why it's its first dynasty is it's its first written record. So it's the first time we have something written down that claimed it to be the first dynasty. Because I say this because you'll see other publications listing other dynasties, but sometimes they're mythical and people weren't quite sure. But the Shang dynasty is believed to be the first dynasty because we have written records saying so. All right, let's move on to our next big question. How did the Zhou, Z-H-O-U, Zhou, which is our second dynasty, claim the right to rule China? So how did the Zhou claim the right to rule China? Let's do some vocabulary. Our word is bureaucracy. That should sound like a word you know, like in the word democracy. And a bureaucracy, if you thought that it was maybe government, you were right. It's a body of unelected government officials. So we work under a democracy, and you know that we have days in which adults go out and vote and elect people into our government. A bureaucracy is unelected. So you wonder, how do they get into office, or how are they part of the governing body? You will be learning how that is. So please turn to your table of contents. Remember, your key is over here. You should have up through page 9, so we're really just adding one page today, page 10. If you are G-Track, you're entering the Zhou Web Graphic Organizer. And if you are T-Track, you're doing a Zhou Main Idea Graphic Organizer, both page 10. So G-Track, your graphic organizer should look like this. And remember, if you're viewing this video because you were absent, the graphic organizers can either be downloaded from Schoology, but you'd have to print that at home, or you're welcome to come here in class. I have them in the I don't have that bin. Don't forget to number it at the bottom away from the holes. And T-Track, you are using the Main Idea Graphic Organizer. Again, number it page 10 at the bottom away from the holes. And on your active listening sheet, move about halfway down the page and let's add the guiding question, how did the Zhou dynasty impact the history of China? Remember, you only have to write the red unless you choose to write the blue part. That's just if you can't remember, we're listening for the rise, the accomplishments, and the fall of the Zhou dynasty in this particular instance. Remember, rise means how did it come or how did it form? The accomplishments, the good things that occurred during the dynasty, and of course, how did it come to an end? How did it fall? Here are your lists, T-Track and G-Track. So maybe you want to take a screenshot of this so that you know what to do before I'm ready to move on. I'm going to then start with the G-Track as I would in class and go over the Shang Dynasty Graphic Organizer, while T-Track, of course, would go ahead and watch the videos. So if you are doing this as a review, you can go ahead and fast forward. If you're T-Track, you want to watch those videos and take notes as you see on your green side. And if you're G-Track, you want to turn to your graphic organizer so that we can go over the answers. Okay, so I'm sorry for the blurriness, but you should have a clean piece on your a clean paper in front of you. So maybe it's just easier to read from that. So there's our guiding question at the top. How have rivers, mountains, and deserts shaped the development of China's civilization? Of course, the first civilization being the Shang Dynasty. It says stretching east across China for more than 2,900 miles, the Huanghe River, or Yellow River, crosses mountain and flows to the Pacific Ocean. This is so important for the growth of this dynasty. It needs this river, and of course it needs the soil that this river is going to give it. So that's the effect. It cuts through thick layers of rich yellow soil called lace. And it's the lace that's really rich in those nutrients to create the fertile soil. And so the rich soil helps the farmers grow large amounts of food. And as a result, the Huanghe Valley has emerged. It has emerged as the Shang Dynasty. I can't stress enough that when they can grow this much food, two things happen. One, you increase your population, and that, of course, is what creates the towns and the cities. And so the more people you have, the more people you have to govern over, and therefore, of course, you're creating the dynasty. And additionally, then, whatever is not being eaten can be traded, and trade equals money, especially when we're talking about ancient times. The more you can trade, remember, we're not talking like paper money as if in today, but we are talking about things and items. And so the more you can trade, the more money your dynasty gets. The more money your dynasty has, the more powerful your dynasty is. Let's move on to the next box. So although this was productive for wheat growing, it often brought great misfortune. The banks of the river overflowed, causing enormous floods. And we'll see this happen throughout history, which is the rivers are good for some things, but then sometimes, of course, when you live near a river and you get tons of water through rain or runoff from the mountains, it becomes problematic. And in this case, it was. As a result, the floods have taken millions of lives. The Chinese called the Huanghe China's sorrow. That was its nickname, in honor of the people killed. Over time, people moved south to another river, the Yangtze. And so really, the dynasty formed between the two. But because, I guess, of the overflowing of the river, some people chose not to live as near to the Huanghe as they did to the Yangtze. According to myth, Yu, the Great, chased away the dragon and built channels to control the floods. Therefore, it was believed that he founded China's first dynasty. Archaeologists, however, have not found any historical evidence to support this claim. So based on written records, China's first dynasty is the Shang and was ruled by kings. And so remember, we talked about this in class with the dynasty, and I talked about it with T-Trek, which is this was the first time there was written record. And so there were other beliefs of possible dynasties, but there was no evidence to support it. So that's why archaeologists and historians go with the Shang dynasty as the first, because it was the first one to have a written record, something written down. And it was written on bone, and they called them oracle bones. And then they formed the first dynasty known as the Shang dynasty. Archaeologists unearthed long buried walls and buildings, and these ruins show that the Shang built the first cities in China. Among these cities was the capital Anyang. The king served as a political, religious, and military leader. So it was important that the figurehead or the king or emperor really did more than just one job. He really helped guide the people. And we learned that was important when we talked about culture because, of course, we know that one of the trends is that people need law. And so to govern over means more than just providing laws, but belief system and making sure that the people are safe. And so that's why the king had these three very important jobs. In time, Shang conquered neighboring areas. As the Shang kingdom grew, kings sent out large armies to defend its borders, and they appointed warlords of whom they relied to stay in power. And so when you're looking at our vocabulary words, you can see that the kings depended on these warlords and their armies to keep everything safe and to keep the Shang Empire dynasty, really, rather, to keep it going, to keep it on its feet. So there you have G-Track, the information from your graphic organizer. I'm now going to move to T-Track to do work with them on the Zhou dynasty. G-Track, you should go back to my list of items to see what you missed in regard to the work that we did in class for the Zhou Dynasty, and then I will go over that with the class the next lesson. As we know, we do the work, and then I use it as a review the next day. That your graphic organizer is always your homework. All right, so if you're G-Track, go and do the work for Zhou Dynasty. If you're T-Track, we did some reading, and then here is the information for your graphic organizer on page 10. The Zhou Dynasty was the longest dynasty in Chinese history. It lasted about 900 years. The dates, of course, and the years are always a little obscure because how old the records are. But sometimes you'll see over 800, sometimes you'll see more than 800, and sometimes you'll see close to 900. So we're going, it lasted about 900 years to cover all of our tracks. The government of this dynasty was not very strong, and so the people within it then began to have a civil war, which is going to be problematic. People don't want to live in the middle of a warring time. Once the wars erupted, many battles were fought, of course, and men died, which led, of course, to the fall of the dynasty, and then many changes also occurred in ancient China. And so we're going to see those changes after we look at the Zhou Dynasty. So this is how the Zhou Dynasty impacted the history of China. Again, if you're T-Track, you should make sure you have this in your binder as page 10, and this is your graphic organizer that you want to study and use for your test. All right, everybody should be caught up now to where the class is if you were absent for the Zhou Dynasty. And remember, this doesn't replace my instruction. You really still should come and see me so that I can help you, but at least you can get caught up via the video.